Hello. uh, this video, or the next two videos, are going to be about the Little Mermaid, which came out in 1989. Is of course based on the Little Mermaid fairy tale by Hans Christian Andersen, which I happen to have a book of Hans Christian Andersen fairy tales, which does obviously include the Little Mermaid. I think it also includes. One moment. Princess and the Pea, Thumbelina, The Emperor's New Clothes, A Little Mermaid, The Steadfast Tin Soldier, The Nightingale, The Ugly Duckling, The Snow Queen, The Shepherdess and the Chimney Sweep, The Happy Family, The Goblin at the Grocer's, and Dance Dolly Dance. So, quite a few different fairy tales that were written by Hans Christian Andersen. I've had this book for a while. I think it came from, I don't know if they have this wherever you're from. It was at least going on here in Nebraska. It is called the Scholastic Book Fair, where you can, different book fairs will come to your school and you can look through the books and you can buy books. And you can also take book catalogs home to your parents, and they, you can order books that way. And then you take the, parents will give you money, you take the books, the order catalog back, and you can, send in the order for the books, and then you'll get the books, a couple of weeks later or whatever. I actually got quite a few different books. I've got like a couple of mythology books that are about that stuff. I think I have a copy of the Odyssey that came that way. But yeah, this is my little Hans Christian Andersen thing, since he did The Little Mermaid. Several other ones were also adapted by Disney. There's also, well, he didn't do, Disney did not do Thumbelina, but there is a connection to Thumbelina because the other studio that was run by Don Bluth at the time did Thumbelina, and and Jodie Bennett, who voices Ariel, also voiced Thumbelina, which I like. The Emperor's New Clothes, that is kind of, gets the takeoff for The Emperor's New Groove several years later. The Steadfast Tin Soldier, that gets a play in Fantasia 2000, which I did the original Fantasia already. I'll do Fantasia 2000 as a separate one a little bit later on. Steadfast Tin Soldier is one of the little episodes that they do with that. I don't think Disney has done The Ugly Duckling, as far as I'm aware, beyond like as a short. The Snow Queen, of course, is Frozen. I almost said Enchanted there. That's wrong. Is Frozen. Frozen is taken from the Snow Queen, that idea. That's about what we got there for the different Hans Christian Andersen stuff that Disney has done. I'll talk a little bit more about the Snow Queen, of course, and, some point I'll probably do a video on Thumbelina, but that'll be like after I finish all the other Disney stuff. I might do some of the Don Bluth movies because I very much like those as well. But there's, the Snow Queen I'll talk about when we get to Frozen, and of course how they kind of changed that a bit. As I said, Little Mermaid came out in 1989. And I'll talk a little bit more about the history of the movie after I talk about the movie itself. Behind me, we have three different Little Mermaid books. We got just this Tales from Under the Sea, which is just a bunch of different shorts about Ariel, the book that's based on the movie, and then we have one of the my side of the fairy tale books. I had these with the Sleeping Beauty movie, or Sleeping Beauty videos, where it's like one side is Ursula's side of the story, one side is Ariel's side of the story. I'll probably look through that because I haven't looked at it for a little while, and I'm pretty sure there's something in there where like, no, Ursula wasn't actually bad. She was trying to help Ariel. Which I'm like, yeah, sure, because cursing someone is a great idea for that. And taking away their voice. But yeah, this video is just going to be about the original Little Mermaid movie itself and the history of it at the studio. The second video has the sequel, the prequel, the Once Upon a Time stuff, the Descendants stuff, the Kingdom Hearts stuff, the House of Mouse, the Ralph Breaks the Internet, the Anything Other Miscellaneous. I might mention a few of it here and there, but most of this video is just going to be about the original. So let's get into that. So the film opens with the song Fathoms Below, which is, kind of like a sea shanty type thing. It's being sung by the crew on the ship where Prince Eric is, and we're introduced to Prince Eric and his advisor, Grimsby, and Eric's dog Max, of course. Um, and at this point in time, out of all the Disney princes up to this point, because we had Prince Charming, Prince Philip. My favorite Disney prince up through the first four is Eric, simply just because he gets the most character development out of all of the princes up to this point in time. We get a bit more on the other princes, of course, as time goes by, which I think is a good thing. It makes them a little bit more relatable. But Eric very much loves the sea and sailing and getting to spend time with his dog, of course, who he adores. And so we get that, and they're talking about Grimsby. Eric was supposed to get married, but that didn't happen. And Grimsby very much wants Eric to get married so he can settle down and take care of the kingdom. But Eric just wants to keep traveling and sailing. Then we get shot down to under the ocean. We are introduced to all these different sea creatures, these beautiful ocean landscapes, and then of course we're introduced to Atlantica and the Mer People. This whole day is supposed to be a big celebration because King Triton, his daughters, are going to be putting on a concert conducted by Sebastian to celebrate, I don't know, whatever. It's just supposed to be a big celebration, and it's supposed to be like the Princess Ariel's premiere as singing, which I'm like, okay, sure, we'll go with that. But so he has 7 daughters. Which I don't remember all of their names off the top of my head. I know I recorded the second video first. So this one I actually already ran through all of the princesses' names. The princesses aren't very the other princesses, Ariel sisters, aren't super big in the story, so it's fine. They're a little bit more prominent in the prequel movie that they did, the Ariel's Beginnings, but that's in the second video, which was recorded first. So my brain is fun. But then it's this big concert is happening, and we have all these merfolks in this amphitheater type thing, and Triton's very happy, and Sebastian is slightly worried because he's like, well, Ariel does have a wonderful singing voice whenever she shows up to practice. And we have the daughters singing, and it's called The Daughters of Triton. It's just the name of the song, and it's they're singing, introducing themselves, and then of course supposed to introduce Ariel, and the conch shell opens and Ariel's not inside, which of course results in Triton getting very angry, all the sisters getting worried, and Sebastian worrying about his job and his life, and which is just funny in and of itself. And then we have we cut to Ariel, who is off on a little adventure with her friend Flounder. They're off to explore a shipwreck, which the shipwreck seems to have been there for a while, considering how degraded the ship looks, and the fact that there's only skeletons inside instead of bodies. But we see her roaming around in the ship. She finds the fork, Dinglehopper. She finds the pipe, Snarfblat. And then they're almost attacked by a shark, which of course we know how that goes. They scurry about, da, 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 Jaws music type thing. And then they end up, they stop the shark, and then they go and visit Scuttle up on the surface, who Scuttle is, of course, a seagull. And he seems to know quite a bit about humans. I was like, well, he might know a tiny bit more about humans than Ariel does, but I wouldn't say that he's the most, useful fountain of knowledge, considering he doesn't know what a fork is, tells her it's something you use to brush your hair, and a Snarfblat is used for music. At least he got the part that the Snarfblat involves something to do with your mouth, since it's a pipe that you're supposed to smoke, and he's thinking it's like a trumpet, I'm assuming, or a saxophone. I don't know when saxophones came into being, but trumpets have been around for quite a while. They've been around for quite a while. But then Ariel remembers, oh frick, music, the concert, we gotta go. and they're trying to rush back to get back in time for the concert, which we know doesn't happen. And then, of course, she gets chastised by her father. But first, we are introduced to Ursula the Sea Witch because her two little uh, eels, or eel buddies, Flopsum and Jepsum. So I'm like, you couldn't have come up with better names for them. They're, eyeing Ariel and following her. And we get, of course, Ursula. It's like, when I was at the palace, we had grand parties. And I just love the way that, I just love Ursula. She's one of my favorite Disney villains. One of my favorites. Just for the way that she acts. And the lady that they got to play her was perfect. I think it was Pat Carroll, I think was her name, but I have the names listed a little bit down. I have the names listed for later. So, she's like, well, keep an eye on this Little Mermaid. She might be useful to help with Triton's undoing. Note that I've noticed about myself when my dad and I are watching through a lot of the movies, I can do most of the lines on beat, which I'm like, that either implies I've watched these movies way too many times, or I paid too much attention to them when I have watched them. Probably both. Both. For a lot of them. Not every single Disney movie, but particularly a lot of the ones that came out when I was growing up. And, I was born in the 90s, so Little Mermaid came out came out just before then. So it definitely was one that I watched a lot while I was growing up. But, we have Triton and Ariel arguing, and Triton's like, you can't go to the surface. There's those barbarians up there, those humans. What if someone had caught you on a fisherman's hook? And she's like, but I was careful, and, nobody saw me, and, I got away fine, and, I don't know why you think they're so bad. And, of course, we get the line, as long as you live under my ocean, you will obey my rules. Which is basically along the lines of, you live under my house, you follow my rules. It's like, only it's the entire ocean, as opposed to, which is, like 70-some% of the Earth's surface. Which is just funny in and of itself. And, Ariel storms off, and Triton is a little bit like, maybe I was too hard on her. And Sebastian's like, no, Your Majesty, definitely not too hard on her. She needs to learn discipline. She needs constant supervision. And Triton's like, okay, fine, you go supervisor. You keep an eye on her. And Sebastian's like, me? I don't remember who they got to play Sebastian. Again, I have the notes written a little bit near the bottom for who voiced who, but the guy that they got to play Sebastian was perfect. And all the voices in this movie are perfect, in my opinion, for all the different characters. But Sebastian follows along. He gripes about tagging along some headstrong teenager. I'm like, dude, you've known her all your life. She has 6 older sisters, and she's probably the one that's most like her father. So, you can do that math. I don't think it's ever stated how old Sebastian is, but then again, Disney timeline and how long animals can normally live is like, okay, they usually last a little bit longer. Considering that the sequel takes place 12 years later, and Sebastian is still in that. Same thing with Flounder, same thing with Max the dog. So, a little bit less likely of, let's follow the logic of how that works. No. Okay. But Sebastian follows Ariel to her hidden grotto, which, in all honesty, replace all of the human things with, like, figurines of, like, superheroes and anime and Pokemon and posters and, and books and everything. I'd be like, okay, I have my new room. Which, that's just one of my favorite set pieces that they had for Little Mermaid is Ariel's grotto, because it's like you look around and you find so many different things. There's pottery, there's paintings, there's books, which probably should be falling apart by this point in time, and paintings that should have been destroyed by the salt water. But there's, all these other knickknacks and, thingamabobs, as she calls them, and whatchamacallits, and, the dinkelhoppers and snarfblats and all this other stuff that she's collected over the course of, over a while, since she has this fascination with humans. And then we, of course, get Ariel complaining about, I just don't see why he doesn't understand. I just don't see how a world that makes such wonderful things could be bad. Which then we go into Part of Your World, which is definitely one of my favorite Disney songs. Definitely one of them. Which, it's her, all this amazing stuff that I have, and why doesn't my father understand how much this stuff means to me? Why doesn't he understand that, the human world interests me? And, it's like, because considering what we find out about your mother in the prequel, she was killed by humans. So I don't think your father wants to have to lose someone else that he loves so much. Probably, I'm also certain at some various points in time throughout Atlantica's history, humans found Atlanteans, whatever. And probably in a lot of cases, like pirates or stuff like that, probably didn't treat them very well. So, you can't really blame your father for wanting to protect you. Parents want to protect their children most of the time. So, yeah. But, Sebastian sees her singing and sees everything that she has. And then we, of course, get it where Sebastian, or Flutter and Ariel notice that Sebastian is there. And they're like, oh, and he's like, what is all this? And Ariel's like, it's nothing. It's my collection. If your father knew about this, they argue, of course, but then, Ariel's grotto has like a hole at the top of it that looks up at the top of the ocean, and, something sails across it, and it kind of blocks it out, and Ariel swims up to go and see what it is, and of course, it's the ship that Eric is on, and, there's fireworks going off, and music and everything, and, Ariel swims closer to get a better look. And of course, there's no lookouts going on this ship because they didn't notice a mermaid with red hair swimming up to them. Admittedly, it is night and there's fireworks going off. So, maybe they're not paying as much attention as they should be, which is just funny. And they get, Ariel, Sebastian's just like, oh God, this is not good. And Ariel kind of gets onto like the side of the ship, because there's, different riggings and other ledges and everything where there's riggings and stuff around the ship. Riggings is about like the only ship term that I know beyond like mast and sail and crow's nest and figurehead and bow, stern, port side, whatever. Doesn't mean that I know what everything means. I probably have some people in my family that could give you a better answer to that, but I'm not one of them. So she's, kind of, and there's, this hole on the side of the ship that she can kind of look onto the deck and see them all dancing around. And she sees Eric and Max, they're, having fun and dancing. And then Scuttle flies down and he's like, so what are we doing here? We're observation and everything. And she's like, he's so handsome, as she stares at Eric. And I love Scuttle because he's like, oh, I don't know. He looks kind of hairy and slobbery to me, because he's looking at Max. And, that, doesn't... I was like, not him. The one playing the Snarfblat. So, Eric. And then, of course, we get Eric and Grimsby talking, and Grimsby reveals that this is supposed to be Eric's birthday party, and Grimsby reveals this statue of Eric. Yeah. Eric's not that impressed with the statue. Neither is Max. And he's like, well, I did hope it would have been an engagement gift or a wedding present. And Eric's just like, I just wasn't in love with her. I'll find the right girl someday. She's out there somewhere. I just have to find her. And, that just makes Ariel smile because she's like, because she's instantly smitten. Which, Disney, the crush, it's a fairy tale. Yeah. And what ends up happening is at that point in time, we get a hurricane that pops up. Well, I mean, it's not like they have like Doppler radar or anything like that at this point in time, and like the time frame that the story appears to take place. So it's not like they can predict the storm coming in. There's no radar, there's no internet, there's no nothing like that. But the storm blows in, and via different things, the ship gets set on fire. Everybody gets off the ship except for Max, and Eric goes back to save Max from the fire. And he, gets Max off the ship, and Max is safe. And Eric the ship goes down, and Eric almost drowns, but of course we know Ariel saves him and gets him back to the surface. And the storm blows through, and the next morning we see Ariel having Eric on the beach, washed up on the shore. She got him to shore, so he's at least not drowning at the moment. And she's like looking him over, and she's like, do you think he's still alive? And I do love the fact that it was like Scuttle looked for his heartbeat in his foot, because he like picks up Eric's foot and like puts it by his face, and he's just like, I don't hear any heartbeat. I'm like, well, first of all, I don't know if you can pick up someone's heartbeat from their foot. But it's Scuttle, it's funny. That's what he's there for. And what ends up happening is, of course, we get Ariel starts singing to Eric as he kind of starts waking up. And she's singing, instead of it being part of that world, we have part of your world. So, a slight difference there. And she's singing about, it's like, if we can walk together, if we can be together and everything, I just, what would I give to be part of your world and everything. And he wakes up, and we get the moment of like him kind of seeing her silhouetted, and it's kind of like, oh, like I was saved by an angel type thing. Not talking about that show. And we just, Eric kind of starts to wake up, but then they hear barking, and Grimsby and Max are approaching, and Ariel dives back into the water to escape. And Grimsby and Max find Eric, of course, and they're like, oh good, we found you and everything. And Max is like sniffing around because he's like, well, I smelled something. I don't know what it was, but I smelled it. And he probably smelled Ariel. And Eric's like, there's this girl, and she was singing, and she was so beautiful, and she saved me. And so we get all that. And they go back, and Grimsby just kind of thinks Eric's hallucinating from drinking a little bit too much salt water, which does happen. And then we get Ariel, the reprise of Part of Your World, where it's Ariel very determinedly making the declaration of, I will be part of Eric's world. I will be part of this. I will, find a way to become human type thing. And then we cut to, we see Ursula watching again with her eels, and she's like, ooh, this is perfect. I just need to wait for my opportunity. Because, Ursula is a sea witch, sorceress. And then we cut to, it's supposed to be just like a couple of days later or so. Ariel is very happy, and she's, been going around the palace humming and singing and, very, very happy and kind of daydreaming, head in the clouds type of thing. And Triton is slightly bewildered by this, and Ariel's sisters are like, well, she's in love. And Triton's like, Ariel? In love? So he's like, okay, this can be useful. Sure. And Sebastian, then we get Sebastian trying to convince Ariel that no, you can't go up and see Eric, because Ariel wants to go and find Eric and show him who she is and everything. And Sebastian's like, no, you can't do that. You have to stay down here. You have to stay under the sea. And then, of course, we get, life under the sea is better than anything they got up there. And that leads into, of course, the great reggae calypso, Under the Sea, which is just another very fun Disney song full of, wordplay and everything that it's just so fun. And, Sebastian and the other fish are trying to convince Ariel that, no, you have to stay under here because it's so much better down here and everything. You know, and Flounder swims in while nobody's paying attention. And, him and Ariel swim off and they go to the grotto. But first we get, Sebastian gets, I love how they do it's like everybody's like, all finishing up the song. They're just like all posing and pointing at Ariel, and she's gone. And Sebastian's like, somebody's got to nail that girl's fins to the floor. I don't know what type of accent Sebastian does, and if I'm doing a horrible rendition of it, I apologize. And then, of course, Sebastian gets called in to see King Triton, and King Triton's like, well, there's something going on with Ariel, and I know you know what it is, so come on, you gotta tell me. And Sebastian tries to play it off because he thinks King Triton knows about Ariel going up on land and saving the human and everything, but Triton just wants to know about Ariel being in love, not knowing about being up on land and everything. And that doesn't work very well because Sebastian unfortunately spills the beans about the fact that Ariel saved a human and she's in love with the human, and Triton's like, you will tell me everything now. And then we cut to Ariel's grotto again, where Flounder has found Eric's statue and somehow got it into the grotto, which I'm like, okay, we see the door of the grotto. It's clearly not small enough to fit through the hole in the top of the grotto. And Flounder is most definitely not strong enough to have moved this thing. But it's there. And I'm like, okay, either Sebastian or Flounder in tail, gathered up a couple of other fish that are strong fish or whatever to move the statue. Admittedly, moving something that heavy underwater sometimes is a bit easier, but it's also harder because if you can at least kind of get it moving, it's marble, it's not going to float, but still. And, Ariel's so happy, and then Triton and Sebastian shows up, and Ariel blurts out, but I love him, Daddy, you can't do this and everything. And he's like, he's a human, you're a mermaid, this will never work. And then he gets very angry and destroys everything in the grotto, destroys the statue, destroys all of the pots and pictures and books and everything else that Ariel has collected over the years, which over the course of the timeline of what we know from the prequel and the animated series is probably about a year and a half. Well, maybe 2.5 to 3 years or so, since the prequel doesn't quite give us an exact age for how old Ariel is at that time. But we get, Triton destroys everything, and Ariel's devastated. And Triton kind of does seem to regret a tiny little bit because he sees how sad and broken Ariel looks. And he does seem a bit remorseful for what he did. But he's done, he did what he did, and he did it to try to protect Ariel. Which I guess would kind of be the equivalent of if, I'm trying to think of what would be a good equivalent. I guess it would be maybe your parents find out that you're really big into rock and roll back when rock and roll was a very bad thing to be into because they thought it was, the devil's music. And your parents throw out all of your stuff. Or I guess it would be maybe a little bit more along the line, or all of your, all the stuff that does with rock and roll, any CDs, well, it wouldn't have been CDs at the time, but any, records, or anything that you had that had to do with rock and roll, them getting rid of it. Or if you had something that you very much loved, I would go maybe I was trying to think of what would be a real world equivalent of that, and the best that I got is that, or I guess if like at the time frame, because this was in the 80s, movie was being made in the 80s, um, and that it might have involved something to do with um, um, I guess maybe like the equivalent might be like rap at that time. I could be wrong, but like rap and R&B and stuff like that at that time. It was like, it's like, parents not wanting their kids to listen to it because it will corrupt them. So it's, they get rid of it, which is not a good thing to do to your kids at all. But, the equivalency of, you take this thing that your kid loves so much and you throw it out. And, Triton does seem a bit remorseful, but he leaves. And Sebastian, Ariel's sad and she tells Sebastian and Flounder to leave her alone. And then, Flotsam and Jetsam are there. And they convince her that, well, she needs to come and see Ursula because Ursula can make all your dreams come true. And, they kind of play up on, she loved Eric. They play up on that. And Ariel follows them, goes with them. And of course, Sebastian and Flounder see her leaving, and she's like, well, I'm going to go see Ursula, the Sea Witch. And Flounder, Sebastian's like, oh my God. And he, follows her, and Sebastian and him follow, or Flounder and Sebastian follow Ariel to Ursula's hideout, where, of course, which is a very interesting looking thing. I've never been exactly sure what it's made out of. It looks like it's made out of the bones of something, but like some ancient type of sea creature, or I don't know. It's always been kind of interesting to me, but I don't know exactly what it's supposed to be. But it's just Ursula's lair. And, Ariel sees all these little wormish type things as she enters, and she's kind of trying to figure out what they are, but Ursula brings her and she was like, it's rude to lurk in doorways. Someone might question your upbringing. And then, of course, we get her singing, the poor unfortunate souls, where it's like, oh, well, I tried to help them, and I'm better, and I'm good, and, but, there's a couple people who haven't been able to, pay the price, and, so they kind of get turned into those things you saw when you came in, little wormy things that you saw when you came in. And, she kind of convinces Ariel, well, I can make a potion that'll make you human for 3 days. Legs and everything. And you can go up on land and you can find your prince. And if you, the way that you make it permanent is you have to get him to fall in love with you. You have to get him to kiss you. A kiss of true love. And, you do that and you're permanently human and you get to live with him forever. Happily ever after type thing. But if you don't get it by sunset on the 3rd day, then you belong to me. And, the exchange, in exchange for your voice, I will do this. And Ariel's, hesitant. She's like, if I do that, I'll never get to see my father or my sisters again. And Ursula's like, well, that's true, but you'll have your man, your lover boy, or whatever you want to call him. And, she kind of pressures her into, they have the contract and the deal and everything, which, as I went over in regards to the Peter Pan video with Captain Hook, we have a deal. He will make a deal with you. Doesn't mean he'll follow the deal. He'll find ways to squirm around the deal, which is kind of what Ursula does. But hers seems to be a bit more magically binding, as we find out. But, she pressures Ariel into it, and Ariel agrees, signs the contract. And that results in, Ursula, we get the whole scene of, Ursula taking Ariel's voice, which in the actual story, it's the Sea Witch cuts off the Little Mermaid's tongue, which is not something that they could have done on Disney. The Black Cauldron was a bit dark, but I don't think they would have wanted to pull off the whole type thing. Yeah, not so much. Something they might be able to pull off in the Pirates of the Caribbean movies, but not this. Which is probably a good thing. Although the Pirates of the Caribbean movies do later on involve mermaids, so reasons. But that's getting away from this. But, so Ariel gets changed into a human form, and of course, she's still underwater, so she can't breathe. And Sebastian and Flounder come and they, whisk her to the surface so she can breathe. And then, of course, it's, we get to the next morning, and Ariel, Sebastian, and Flounder are up on, up in this little lagoon area by the beach. And, Ariel's examining her legs and standing up and trying to walk around, which is not going so well. And then Scuttle shows up and he's like, well, there's something different about you. I know your hairstyle, nothing. And then I love Sebastian. He's like, she's got legs, you idiot. She made a deal with the sea witch and traded her voice to have legs. This is horrible. And, it's like just Sebastian lamenting and being so angry. He's like, his father's gonna, her father's gonna kill himself a crab, and blah blah blah. And we get this great scene, which Ariel says nothing for a good chunk of the movie, but we do get the whole her face, her emotions are very very obvious, because she can't talk, so her emotions on her face have to be very telling of what she's thinking. And we get Sebastian. I was like, well, let's go back to your dad. We'll go back to the witch. We'll get your voice back, and then you go home with all the normal fish. And Ariel has him in her hands, and it's her just looking sadder and sadder. And he's like, you go home with all the normal fish, and she's like, and just be miserable for the rest of your life. All right. I'll try to help you find the prince. Which I debated using like Sebastian's little speech there that he does as the end quote for this video, but I didn't because it's a bit too long. And there's a bit more of like a two-part bit that goes with it, so it's a bit too long for what I wanted to do for this. I might use it at some point because it is kind of one of my favorite bits, because it's it's one character basically talking to themselves and then still getting the emotion from the other character that doesn't talk. So I do like what they did with that when they were animating that. And that scene and a couple of others, which when I get to the kind of the development and the making of the movie, I'll talk a little bit more about how those scenes kind of came into being a little bit more, or kind of how they ended up being, finished the way that they were. As opposed to, I guess, the way that they had initially been before they had been rewritten, which is a very complex way of saying they changed it. But he's like, fine, I'll try to help you find the prince. And they, they get Ariel dressed up in basically like a sail and rope from a ship that probably wrecked recently. And we get Eric and Max are out walking around, and Eric is like, well, I got, where can I find that girl? And Max smells Ariel, and he starts following the smell and like kind of drags Eric with him, because Max knows instantly that, oh, this is the same smell that was on the beach with my master when we found him a couple of days ago. And this the smell sounds, or the smell is a good smell, because I guess it's supposed to say that dogs are a good judge of character, which yes and no. Some dogs are a good judge of character, some dogs are not. Our dog is more, we could probably have someone try to break into our house and Rainy probably wouldn't care as long as the person petted him and maybe gave him a treat. But then the flip side of that is, because the dog would have wanted to get pets from whoever it was that decided to break into our house, unless you are wearing clothes that automatically repel dog hair, which our house is not worth anything. There's nothing in this house worth trying to steal that would be worth you investing in that. Trust me. But you would have dog hair all over you from Rainy and be like, well, that's the criminal right there. Well, how do you know that? Because there's white dog hair all over him, and I'm sure if you tested it, it will match whatever our dog's DNA is. type thing, which would be what it would be if someone tried to rob our house, but that's not the case. So, some dogs are very good judge of character, some dogs are not. Max appears to be one of the ones that is a good judge of character, or a good judge of scent, because he drags Eric to where Ariel is. And we get the moment where, of course, Ariel's up on the, well, Max kind of chased Ariel, so she's not familiar with the dog. With the dog, um, Max likes Ariel very much from what we see later on, but Eric and Ariel kind of interact, and he's like, "Are you okay?" and everything, and she's like, "I was," She kind of explains. He's like, "Well, you seem very familiar. Have we met before?" And she's like, "Mm-hmm." Nodding, and he's like, "Are you the girl that I've been, looking for? What's your name?" And she goes, and that's when she remembers, "Oh, I can't talk." And she's, the whole "I can't talk" type of a thing. And he's like, "Well, then you can't be the girl I was looking for." But, it's like, he's still gonna help her. Because he's like, "You're in a shipwreck or whatever. Come on, I'll take you back to the palace, back to my castle, and we'll, get you all, all cleaned up and all better, and, get you some food and everything." Which, okay, points to the prince. He gets prince points for that. And takes her back, and Sebastian is kind of tagging along because there's like a pocket. I don't know if this was like a weird shirt they had Ariel put on, or a sail or something, but there's something and there's a pocket in it, so Sebastian is tagging along, of course. And Flounder is still in the water, and Scuttle is, I guess, kind of air patrol. And, so we get the bit where, Ariel's taking a bath, and we are introduced to Carlotta, and who's kind of just one of the prince's servants. Seems to be like one of the head maids in the castle, or whatever the case may be. Considering how comfortable she seems to be with talking to Eric, she probably was possibly one of the people who has been around Eric most of his life, along with Grimsby, and a few of the other servants. And so Sebastian goes on the little fun ride of, Ariel gets a bath, and then Sebastian in the cloak, or the whatever it was that Ariel was wearing, gets washed. And so Sebastian gets to go on a fun ride there. And then Sebastian, of course, ends up in the kitchen with Chef Louis, which doesn't go well for either of them, because we get Le Poisson, which is, I think, just translates to the fish or something like that, because they don't really dumb down what Louis is trying to do, or make it a little less gruesome, because it's they show him cutting off the heads of fish, they show him pulling out their bones, they show him pulling out guts and cooking them, and trying to, find Sebastian, and tries to stuff him with bread and everything, and saying, it's like, "It doesn't hurt because you're dead," and, all this other stuff that, results in Sebastian and Louis, Louis chasing Sebastian around the kitchen and, destroying everything. And we cut out to, Grimsby and Eric were talking, and, Grimsby's just like, you can't keep trying to find this girl that doesn't exist. They don't just swim around in the ocean saving people. And Eric's just like, "I'm gonna find her, and I'm gonna marry her." And, Grimsby is just like, this is ridiculous type thing. Is like, you can tell that that's what Grimsby is thinking. He's like, "Plenty of perfectly good women around here that you can marry. You're a princess from somewhere else that you can marry. You don't need to marry some." It's like, you can see the cogs turning in Grimsby's head. And that's when, Carlotta shows up with Ariel in her very pretty pink dress, which is another outfit of Ariel's that I very much like. During Little Mermaid, Ariel, I mean, most princesses don't really get that many costume changes. I mean, Snow White had like her rags at the beginning of the movie, and then she gets her, her more pretty dress that she wears for most of the movie. And then, Cinderella, her, she had her maid's outfit, and then she had the pretty version of the nice version of the dress that the mice made, and then that gets shredded, and then we have her ball gown, of course, and then she's back in her servant's clothes, and then she's in her wedding dress by the end of the movie. So there's all that for, you know, Cinderella. But, you know, um, Belle, I think, actually goes through a few more costume changes than Ariel does. Aurora has her, you know, her kind of peasant girl outfit, and then she has the dress that goes back and forth between pink and blue, which isn't really a costume change, it's color change. So that's a bit different. But Ariel, she has her, of course, her normal mermaid outfit, you know, normal mermaid self, which just has seashells, you know. Link in the video, link in the description for the shirt. Um, better picture of the shirt. Um, you know, she has that outfit, and then she has kind of the rags outfit, and then she has the pretty pink dress, and then she has her blue dress for while they're roaming around, and then she, you know, for well, their day out, and then of course she has her, you know, the back in her regular thing, and then she has her wedding dress for the end of the movie, of course. Because if you haven't seen Little Mermaid in and of itself, then why are you watching this? It's like, go watch the original and then watch my weird review of memories and criticisms and fun thing about the movie for why I love it. I swear to God, I really hope, it's like, I don't really care for ads, but I swear to God, I hope they have at least some Disney Plus ads during some of my videos, because reasons, because it's like, it's the perfect product placement. Which is funny. But, you know, so Ariel is sitting down to eat with Eric and Grimsby, and Eric is just like instantly smitten again with Ariel. As, you know, he can't like take his eyes off of her, and Grimsby notices. And, you know, Ariel picks up the fork, and she thinks it's a dingle hopper, and of course tries to brush her hair with it, which results in, you know, looks from Grimsby and Eric of, huh? And she's like, puts it down. She's like, and then she, you know, Grimsby has his pipe, the Snarf Blat, and Ariel tries to, you know, blow into it, and it just results in smoke going everywhere, which is just funny. Which, again, they put so much life into Ariel in those scenes, even though she can't talk. There's so much life there because she's just so fascinated by everything that's around her, because it's so new to her and everything, and she's actually seeing how things work in the human world, what goes where and everything, which is very nice. And then, you know, Carlotta goes to the kitchen to get the food, and she scolds Louie, and the kitchen is just destroyed, of course, and she takes the food out, and Sebastian ended up hiding on one of the plates, so kind of, you know, pulling a Gus from, you know, Cinderella, where he's hiding under one of the bowls, one of the cups or whatever, you know, teacups or whatever on the tray. And, you know, Ariel sees Sebastian when, you know, Grimsby lifts up his, you know, covering to, you know, look at his food. And then she, you know, well, Eric and Grimsby are talking about, you know, well, Eric, you should take our young lady here on a tour of the kingdom tomorrow. I'm sure she'd like it. And, you know, Ariel's getting Sebastian over to her plate, and then she hides him, like, smiling at Eric, like, nothing happened. And he's like, well, would you like to go on a tour? And she's like, yes. Well, she didn't say anything, of course, when she's like, inside, she's like screaming in her head, yes, of course. Which thought bubbles for Ariel during some of the stuff is quite nice. I would think would be kind of funny. And, you know, Grimsby's like, well, let's eat before this crab wanders off my plate. The crab's gone. I love that. That's just funny. And, you know, that night, Sebastian is discussing, you know, with Ariel before she goes to bed about, you know, we have to have plans for tomorrow to get Eric to kiss you. And, you know, Ariel falls asleep, and Sebastian just looks her over, and he's like, you are completely hopeless, child. And then, you know, he falls asleep. And of course, we get that same night, we cut down to the palace, where King Triton is very worried because Ariel's hasn't shown back up. Sebastian's not there. I'm assuming he's kind of worried about Flounder, since Flounder is Ariel's best friend, but he's not as concerned about Flounder. But, you know, Flounder isn't even a flounder, so it's just a funny name for the fish. But, you know, so King Triton is very worried, and they're like, well, we haven't found her. We're still looking. You know, no stone unturned, no coral unsearched. We have to find her, find Ariel, and find Sebastian. And he's blaming himself, of course, because, he destroyed Ariel's, treasure grotto thing. And he's blaming, he's like, why did I do this? It's like, he wants his daughter back, which you can't blame him. I'm pretty sure all of Ariel's sisters are very worried about her as well. And then we cut to the next morning, of course, which Ariel and Eric going on the tour of the kingdom, which is just, Ariel is so fascinated by everything. They dance, there's so many different types of food, and there's puppets, and so many other things. And then, riding around in the carriage, which Ariel is just fascinated by the horse. It's like she's so familiar with everything that's like underwater and everything like that from, throughout the course of the animated series that they had for Little Mermaid. We see her doing all these other adventures and interacting with all these other animals, but now she's introduced to all these land animals, horses and all this other stuff. And, later that evening, we have it where her and Eric are out in a lagoon, swamp. Well, it's not swamp, just a lagoon, lake type area. And, they're talking, and well, things are very quiet at that point in time. And it's just like nothing. And Scuttle's like, nothing is happening. Why aren't they kissing? Type thing. Because, Scuttle wants Ariel to be okay, because Ariel and Scuttle are friends, of course. Which we have Scuttle attempt to try to make things romantic, which just results in him making horrible noises. And I love the funny bit where it's just like, Eric's just like, somebody ought to find that animal and put it out of its misery. Like, I've heard animals make that sound. It's not a fun sound to hear an animal make. But of course we get the Kiss the Girl song, which is, of course, as I said, I grew up on Little Mermaid. I can do so many of the songs, karaoke is Disney for me. Not that I do karaoke that much, but still, I can do the Disney songs, a lot of the ones from the 90s, pretty much straight through, and hit the beats fairly well, regardless of whether or not I can sing is up for debate. But, we get the, percussion, strings, winds, words, and then he goes into Kiss the Girl, and things are going great, and Eric tries to guess Ariel's name, and he tries these different names that are definitely not it, and then Sebastian whispers, Ariel, it's Ariel, and then he goes, Ariel, and Ariel's very happy because he got her name right, and we get all that fun bit, and they're about to kiss, they're so close, and then Flotsam and Jetsam shows up and knock the boat over, making ruining the mood. And then Ariel and Eric head back to the palace, and Ursula's just like, that was too close, and she decides to take matters into her own tentacles, and she transforms herself into a beautiful woman, Vanessa, who is I was trying to figure out if like she was supposed to look a little bit like Ariel, but just shifted a little bit in color scheme. She has a slightly different hairstyle, of course, than what Ariel does, but she turns herself into the Vanessa form, and makes her way up on land so she can get to the prince. And we have the moment where Ariel's looking out and watching Eric playing with Max that night, and they have Grimsby comes out, and he tells Eric, one better than any dream girl is one that's right in front of your eyes. And we do get this moment where it is Eric deciding that, because he keeps, he has this flute that he keeps playing with the theme of, part of your world that Ariel had been singing to him when he woke up. And he takes the flute, and he makes the decision of, yeah, I'm not gonna look for this dream girl anymore. We have Ariel here. She's very nice. She's very sweet. I very much like her. She's better than something that's possibly never going to come back. And so he decides that he is gonna be with her, and he throws the flute pipe, whatever it is, into the ocean. And he's ready to go back inside, probably to tell Grimsby, okay, I'm gonna go and talk to Ariel in the morning, and kiss her, propose to her, whatever the case may be. And unfortunately, that's when Vanessa shows up, starts walking down the beach, and she's using Ariel's voice singing, and it hypnotizes Eric. And, you know, the next morning, Scuttle flies in, and he tells Ariel, she's like, oh, there's great news, there's going to be a wedding and everything. And Ariel's so happy, and she runs down the stairs to go and try to talk to Eric and, see, oh, yay, it's going to be a wedding, and we're going to get married and everything. And it's Eric and Vanessa that are getting married. And Ariel is, of course, instantly brokenhearted. And, which is, of course, Ursula's plan. Hypnotize Eric, get Eric to marry her. Ariel doesn't get her kiss before sunset. And, we cut to later in the day, a little bit before sunset is when the ship is leaving, and Ariel's not on the ship. Sebastian and Ariel and Flounder are sitting there and just very sad. And, Ariel's, of course, crying because, Eric is going to marry this other woman. And Scuttle ends up flying over the ship, the wedding ship, and he hears Ariel's singing voice, which he's probably heard before. And he goes down to look because, Scuttle kind of thinks that, oh, this is Ariel that's going to get married on the ship. So, it's probably Ariel singing because her and Eric probably kissed and she maybe got her voice back and type thing. So he goes down to investigate and he sees Vanessa singing, and he's like, he knows instantly this is not Ariel. He's known Ariel for quite a while, and he's like, no, that's definitely not Ariel. It's her voice, but it's not Ariel. And, Vanessa looks into the mirror, and he sees Ursula reflected in the mirror because the disguise is only an illusion that's, skin deep. It's kind of like, I was trying to think of a good example of this. It's kind of like, it's like someone's a vampire and the vampire can't see the reflection in the mirror type of thing. People can't see the vampire's reflection in mirrors, and, vampires don't show up on, video cameras, I guess, type of thing. Or, pictures or anything like that. But in this case, it's, Sebastian, or Scuttle. I'll get through Ariel's friend's names eventually. Scuttle sees that, oh, this is the Sea Witch. That's not good. And he flies to go find Ariel and the others, and he tells them that it, he takes him a couple of seconds to get the right words. It was like, it's the witch was watching a mirror, and she's singing with a soul instead of pipes and everything. And he's like, the woman that the prince is going to marry is the Sea Witch, and she's using Ariel's voice. And, Ariel is very determined at this point in time because she's going to go save Eric because she knows that it can't be real. That Eric, that Eric can't actually love Ursula. So Ariel, dives into the water, and they get these barrels that are sitting there on the dock, and, Sebastian cuts them down, and they go into the water, and Flounder starts carrying Ariel, dragging Ariel on the barrel toward the ship so they can get to the ship. And Sebastian goes down to go get King Triton and get back up that way. And Scuttle is supposed to find a way to stall the wedding, of course, which involves him gathering up all of the different animals that had been in the lagoon and the sea creatures and everything. There's bluebirds, pelicans, flamingos, lobsters, starfish, dolphins, seals, all this other stuff, to head to the ship and start stalling the wedding. And, the wedding is going on, the priest is going, and, all of the animals show up at the right time and start attacking, Vanessa. I love the fact that, Eric and the priest are paying no attention to this because Eric is still hypnotized, so he's not paying any attention to anything beyond what Vanessa wants him to do. And the priest is just, reading along and everything, and that's just funny. Vanessa, Ursula, is getting attacked by birds, seals, starfish, crabs, lobsters, blah, 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 all attacking her and everything to distract her so she can't finish the wedding. And, all the guests are probably freaking out at this point in time because they're not under control. And, of course, that's when Ariel gets up on deck because Flounder got her to the ship, and she gets up on the deck. And Scuttle attacks Vanessa and ends up ripping off the seashell necklace, which rolls over to Ariel and then shatters. And, Ariel gets her voice back, and that breaks the spell that's on Eric. So he sees Ariel, and she can talk again. And she, in the background, we see the sun setting and setting and setting and setting. because it's like on a timer, blah 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 blah. We have time limit here, and Ariel goes over, or Eric rushes over to Ariel, and because he's, he remembered blah 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 blah. I was gonna ask you to marry me. I'm sorry, blah blah, type of a thing. And it's right before they kiss, and it's like, if you had just literally ran over and kissed her, this would be fine. But then we wouldn't get our big climactic Disney ending that we need, where the bad guy gets very powerful and blah 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 blah. But Eric almost kisses her, but then sunset hits and Ariel gets turned back into the mermaid. And then, Ursula bursts out of the Vanessa disguise, grabs Ariel, dives into the water. Eric dives after her with, Grimsby shouting after them. Eric's like, I lost her once. I'm not going to lose her again. And, Ursula drags Ariel down the sea bottom. And she's like, I'm not after you. I've got, bigger fish to fry. And that's when Triton shows up. And, Ursula, he's threatening Ursula with the Triton, of course. And Ursula's like, well, I have this, legally binding contract with your daughter. Tries to destroy it, which of course doesn't work. And, she's getting ready to turn Ariel into the little wormish thing that she has around her hideout, her lair. And she's like, well, I would be willing to trade the daughter of the Sea King for the Sea King, for the ruler of the ocean. And Triton, of course, he probably would have done this for any of his daughters anyway, if they had been in this type of a situation. And because I'll go over the original fairy tale when I'm done with this, when I'm done with the summary. But it's the sisters that kind of make the sacrifice in the book, in the original story a little bit. But Triton probably would have made the same sacrifice for any of his daughters if they were in this type of a situation. But he, takes Ariel's place in the contract, and he gets turned into the little worm thing, and Ariel's freed. But, Ursula takes, of course, the crown and takes the Triton. And, that's when, she's about to kill Ariel. And probably, then, take Ariel's body and Triton's little, worm form back to Atlantica and start ruling Atlantica after she has a lot of fun trying to destroy stuff. Which is not a good idea. But Eric shows up, and he, I think he hits her with something. It's like a harpoon or a dart or something like that he hits her with that gets her distracted. And he's trying to swim up to the top, and Flotsam and Jetsam go after him, and Flounder and Sebastian, fight off Flotsam and Jetsam. Flounder, paddles one of them with his tail, and Sebastian, uses his, claws the other one. And Ariel, prevents Ursula from hitting Eric by making Ursula hit Flotsam and Jetsam, which destroys them and distracts Ariel and Eric for a short amount of time. It distracts Ursula for a couple of seconds. So Ariel, and if Ariel had just grabbed the Triton and then zapped Ursula, this would have been finished. But again, climactic ending. And, Ariel's swimming up after Eric to, get him to the surface, and they're kind of reunited. And he's like, I won't leave you type thing. He's like, he's not going to let her get hurt. And of course, Ursula then makes herself giant. And we get the whole climactic bit of, the ships start raising up, and she's like, I will rule Atlantica, and I will rule the ocean, and everything will be mine, and, all that fun stuff. And, she makes the whirlpool thing, and all these ships get pulled to the surface. And Eric jumps on one of the ships, and Ariel is, kind of pinned. And I don't really care for the damsel in distress type of thing, but Ariel saved Eric at the beginning of the movie. Ariel saved Eric from marrying Vanessa by, going after him, and all the animals helping her. And then we have Ariel saved Eric from being zapped by Ursula with the Triton. So Ariel has now saved Eric 3 times. And, Eric, Ariel getting on a ship, she doesn't know how to steer a ship. Eric does. So Eric gets onto one of the ships that's there spinning around in the whirlpool, and he, of course, gets it to the point where he can stab it through Ursula and saves Ariel that way. saves Ariel and kind of saves a lot of people that way. And of course, Ursula, kind of convulses and dies and everything, which I have not read anything by H.P. Lovecraft, but apparently that's one of the ways that you kill Cthulhu or one of the ways that that killed Cthulhu in one of the books is a ship stabs part of the prow, I think that's what that's called, in through Cthulhu, and that's kind of how they killed Cthulhu in one of the H.P. Lovecraft books, and that's how they killed Ursula here. And, so we cut to the next morning, and, Ursula's dead, long gone. The Triton and the crown floated back down to where King Triton was, and he gets turned back into normal, and he gets his Triton back, and then all of the other merfolk that had been, cursed, tricked by Ursula, back in her hideout, are all turned back into their mermaids or merfolk forms, so they're all safe, and which is a good thing. And so they're all reunited with their families. I'm assuming we don't get an exact age on Ursula, but I'm assuming she's probably around the same age as Triton, given the fact that she makes a comment of she had been in the palace and that Triton had been the one to banish her. So she might be a tad bit older than Triton or around the same age as him. In the Broadway musical, I think it's stated that they're brother and sister, which I'm not as familiar with the musical of Little Mermaid in regards to like the Broadway version of the musical. I'm not as familiar with that, but I think there's a song that results in like Ursula claiming that her and Triton were, she's his older sister, which, yeah, I guess it would result in some animosity there. Not good animosity by any means. Animosity can't be good. Sorry, redundant statement. But we cut to the next morning, and Eric kind of washed up on the beach again. And probably Ariel made sure he got to the beach. And Ariel's sitting on the rock looking at Eric while he's, waking up on the beach. And we have Triton and Sebastian off to the side. And they're just talking, and he's like, Sebastian's kind of changed his tune a little bit of like, well, she does love him, Your Majesty. And Triton's like, I know. There's just one problem. Well, Sebastian says like, well, sometimes you have to let teenagers live their own lives. And Triton's like, yeah, there's just one problem. Sebastian's like, what's that, Your Majesty? How much I'm going to miss her. And then, Triton transforms Ariel into a human permanently. And, she sends her father this huge smile because she's so happy now, and she runs to on land, and Eric wakes up, and we get the moment where they finally get to kiss, and great, fully human Ariel. And then of course we cut to the wedding, and everybody's happy on the ship, and there's all the Atlanteans out in the water that are so happy, and the fish and Scuttle and the dolphins and whatever that are there for Ariel's wedding everybody's happy. And I love Ariel's wedding dress, and I mean it's a bit over the top for like anything that I would want to wear, but I still love Ariel's wedding dress. I think and Ariel and Eric I love Ariel and Eric as a couple. And so we have Ariel saying goodbye to Flounder and Scuttle, and we have one more bit of Sebastian being chased around by Louis, which Sebastian kind of one-ups Louis by like cutting one of the ropes, and one of the rigging comes down and like whacks Louis in the head, giving Sebastian the win, and he jumps back into the water. And then we get where, of course, King Triton says goodbye to Ariel, which is of course results in them hugging and her saying I love you, Daddy, and everything, which we get a little bit of that with Disney. I mean, Disney, it's either one parent is gone, both parents are gone, or I was trying to think of like, how many Disney movies do the characters actually still have both parents? I'm like, Little Mermaid, she still has her dad. I'm like, is there any? Or is there any Disney movies, or like at least the princess-based ones, where they have both of their parents? Snow White, no. Cinderella, no. Okay, Sleeping Beauty. She still has both of her parents in Sleeping Beauty. That's something. Um, Belle, dad. Jasmine, dad. Um, yeah. Anna and Elsa, dead parents. Um, you know, Tiana has her mom. Um, Merida has both parents. Um, all that fun stuff there. Um, but so everybody's happy, and Triton makes the rainbow, which is peace between the Atlanteans and the humans. Um, Into the cast. Yeah, because that's where the movie ends. Jodie Bennett is Ariel, as I said. Christopher Daniel Barnes is Prince Eric. Pat Carroll is Ursula, who I think has voiced Ursula in most of the different things that they've done for Disney. I think she voices her in any of the House of Mouse stuff, and I think in the Kingdom Hearts stuff where Ursula is around. I think they did that. Kenneth Mars is King Triton. I remember that he died unfortunately a few years ago. Buddy Hackett is Scuttle. Samuel E. Wright is Sebastian. Ben Wright, I don't think there's a relation there, is Grimsby. Grimsby, the same gentleman that voiced Grimsby, also voiced Roger in 101 Dalmatians. History for Little Mermaid. So, they were working on in 1986. One of the co-directors of Great Mouse Detective, Ron Clements, discovered the Hans Christian Andersen fairy tales. He probably at least kind of knew about them, but he kind of more found them, and he read The Little Mermaid, and he was like, well, why didn't we ever use this? And then he realizes how dark the ending of the Little Mermaid is, because history for The Little Mermaid takes place a little bit longer, over 3 days. She's still princess. The Little Mermaid falls in love with a human, and there's actually a twofold thing with that. She wants to find love, but she also wants to become immortal. And she makes a deal with the Sea Witch, which is just a character in the book. She's not really or in the original fairy tale, she's not as over the top as what they make Ursula into, of course. Sea Witch says, well, I'll give you, I'll make a deal with you. You can turn into a human and everything. You'll have the most graceful legs and everything, but I got to keep your voice for payment, type of a thing. And, you get to stay human, for however long, until the prince marries. Prince marries you, it's permanent. And the Little Mermaid, this is where, of course, she actually cuts off the Little Mermaid's tongue, which is just disgusting. I was trying to think of, Little Mermaid does not have a happy ending in regards to the original fairy tale. Little Mermaid goes to the surface. She finds the prince, because she had still saved him from drowning and everything. She finds the prince, and she lives in the palace for a while. She has these graceful legs, and she can dance wonderfully and everything, but every time that she walks, it feels like she's walking on broken glass, unfortunately. And she falls more in love with the prince, and the prince says, well, I would love to marry somebody like you and everything. And it's, and then it cuts to a little while later that, she's lived in the palace for a while, and she's kind of like, the prince, I think the prince says something along the lines of like, I'd love you like a sister, type of a thing. So he's not in love with her. And, that's not what you want to hear. That's not what you want to hear. But then it cuts to the prince is supposed to get married, and I think in the original story, I think it's just like an arranged marriage, or it's arranged marriage or something along those lines. And so it's the Little Mermaid gets to be at the wedding on the ship, and her sisters showed up because it's like on the next morning after the prince the next morning at sunrise. She will turn into sea foam, because that's when the Sea Witch's spell will end. If the Little Mermaid had managed to marry the prince and get him to kiss her, then it would have been a permanent thing. She would have been a human and immortal type of a thing. But what ends up happening is if she doesn't get that, the next morning after the wedding, she will turn into sea foam. She still kind of gets to be immortal as sea foam, but she'll still, she doesn't get to be human. She doesn't get to be with the prince. She's kind of stuck. She's gone. And I think I remember correctly, in the book, she still has sisters and such. And like they went to the sea witch and made another deal with the sea witch, and they gave up their hair in order to get a knife to give to the Little Mermaid, so that way she could then, I don't remember if the Little Mermaid actually, if she kills the prince and his new bride, or if she just kills the prince and like spills his blood over her legs, she will get her fins back and she can be a mermaid again. Or if it's, it's one of those two. It's either she has to kill both of them or one of them and like put their blood on her legs, and she'll be able to turn back into a mermaid. The Little Mermaid, for her love for the prince, of course, does not do this. And like her sisters kind of begged her to do it so she could come back to them because they've missed her so much, but she still doesn't do it. And she, the next morning, she turns into sea foam. If I remember correctly, she decides to, if I remember correctly, she gives the prince like one more kiss on the cheek type of a thing before she leaves. Because she's, very, she still loves him and everything, so she doesn't want to kill the prince, of course. So I think she still gives him like one more goodbye kiss, like on the cheek or something, and like wishes him and the bride, his new bride, luck, before she leaves. Yeah, and then she, dives into the sea and turns into sea foam at sunrise. Is how that ends. And Ron Clements did a slight rewrite on the script, or rewrite on the story to make it a little less gruesome. And where the Little Mermaid and the prince are happily ever after. But Disney at this point in time was working on a sequel to the movie Splash, starring Daryl Hannah and Tom Hanks. I have seen it; it's a good movie, but they didn't end up doing the sequel to it. But they do end up doing Little Mermaid. And there had been a lot of development. Ariel, she was supposed to be a blonde, but then they went with red hair instead to make her a little less Daryl Hannah-ish. At least one of Ariel's sisters I know has blonde hair. But they worked through a lot of that, and there was a lot of other discussion. And then, of course, we have Howard Ashman and Alan Menken, who come in to do the songs for Little Mermaid. Howard Ashman. He had written Little Shop of Horrors, and he had written another musical called Smile, and Jodie Benson had been in Smile, that unfortunately didn't last the musical didn't last very long because it didn't end up being what Howard Ashman wanted it to be. But we get a lot of, Howard Ashman and Alan Menken do all the music for Little Mermaid, and it's wonderful music. And Howard Ashman actually ended up rewriting a couple of the scenes. He rewrote the scene between Ariel and Sebastian when Sebastian is trying to convince Ariel to go back down and find her father and get everything fixed so she can be human again, or be a mermaid again. And, he rewrote that to get it so it works better for Ariel and Sebastian, where of course Sebastian still decides to help her. And then he rewrote the scene at the end between King Triton and Sebastian into having it be better for, King Triton, making it more believable, I'm guessing, for wanting to, for Ariel to then be able to become human. Which, that works. Jodie Benson, Ariel, has stated that when they filmed Part of Your World, when they filmed her singing that was her favorite thing of film to ever record. Because, of course, a lot of the times when the actors and actresses are in the booths recording, either for singing or for all the lines for the movies and everything, some of the sketch artists or the head animator for the character will be in there watching them, and then they will also, of course, sometimes just have them filmed as well as being recorded, so that way the animator can watch the person singing. Part of that world was almost not in the movie. It was almost cut from the movie, which, like, looking back, it's like, why would they have done that? obviously they didn't, but so they almost did for reasons, because they did a pre-screening of it before it had been fully finished. The sequence had been fully finished, and they had it for a bunch of kids, and one of the kids like dropped their popcorn and got very distracted by that, and they thought that would like that was just kind of get cut from the movie. It didn't, thank God it didn't. Little Mermaid actually kind of saved the animation department from Disney, but the fact that it was on the brink of going away, that the animation department was kind of on the brink, it was like, let's throw everything we got into this. And they did. And it's wonderful. It's wonderful. And, Little Mermaid saved the animation department, which is so good. But there had actually been talks of doing a back in the 1940s, Walt and an artist named Kai Nielsen had been working on the idea of doing a Little Mermaid as a short, based a little bit more on the actual fairy tale, where it's a little bit closer to the fairy tale, possibly not quite as gruesome, but still where the Little Mermaid, where it's the prince ends up marrying someone else, someone who's like arranged to marry or something like that, and then and they've done beautiful drawings for it, like the storm sequence and other things, and they actually end up using a lot of that material when they were making Little Mermaid itself as inspiration for like what the storm would look like and other interactions with the characters. And in the bonus features that I have for the movie, they show a lot of the different artwork, and I think I'm gonna try to put some of it in here if I can find some of it. But it's just beautiful for what they do. And unfortunately, the Little Mermaid that they had been working on back in the 1941, it was supposed to be like one of the ones that they did after Snow White, not as a full feature, but it just as like not a silly symphony, but just as like a short that they would have done. But that didn't happen, obviously. There had been a lot of work for it. Other different just trivia about Disney. The budget for Little Mermaid ended up being $40 million. The gross revenue, $211.3 million. Yeah. And I mean, like, I don't know what that is adjusted for inflation, or where that puts it in comparison to like product or box office value in regards to like, Frozen or Tangled or whatever, but that's still definitely a, yeah, let's do that again type of a thing. And, that kind of results in them, in Disney returning to this and returning to the fairy tale type stuff, because the next one is Beauty and the Beast. And then, which Howard Ashman worked on that as well. Unfortunately, he died before Beauty and the Beast came out, which I'll cover a little bit. But Howard Ashman was so wonderful when it came to lyrics and everything, and even working on trying to, as I said, rewriting some of the scenes to make them better, and just other things like that I love. When Disney did the re-release for the I think it was a Platinum Edition collection or something like that for the Little Mermaid, there is a short on the DVD that is called The Little Match Girl, which is I believe that is another Hans Christian Andersen one. I don't think it was listed in here as one of them. No, it wasn't. But it's a Little Match Girl, which is, I do believe that it is another Hans Christian Andersen version, fairy tale. It had been intended for Fantasia, but it didn't end up being done. So it's just kind of, the tale set to music. It's, I think it's supposed to be like a little Russian fairy tale. If it's not Hans Christian Andersen specifically, it's just a Russian fairy tale that they stuck with this because it worked very well. And it's this little girl who's supposed to be selling matches. And, nobody wants to buy the matches because they all have their own or whatever. And she ends up in this little alley at night, and she keeps lighting the matches to warm herself up for short periods of time. And she keeps having flashes of, warm and happy and family. And it's supposed to be around Christmas, so she has a flash of it being Christmas. And at the end of this episode, or at the end of it, she uses her last match, and it goes out and everything. and it's winter, so it's very, very cold out, of course. And in the short, it's the little girl dies. Unfortunately, the little match girl dies, but she's taken away. Her spirit gets taken away to a happier place, type of a thing. So it's still sad, but slightly happy note. But kind of goes with the way a lot of the Hans Christian Andersen fairy tales tend to go to a degree. And I already, as I said, I recorded the second part of this video first. The second part, the miscellaneous Little Mermaid stuff, where I do talk about Kingdom Hearts. But a side note about Kingdom Hearts, which I didn't put there, but I'll say here now, but then you'll see it later, but blah, 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 whatever. In Kingdom Hearts, there are the Princesses of Heart, who are a lot of different princesses from Disney history. But Ariel is not a Princess of Heart. Alice from Alice in Wonderland is, but Ariel is not. I'm assuming that's because they wanted to be able to use Ariel as a reason for Sebastian, or for Sora, Donald, and Goofy to be able to swim around in Atlantica, and them helping Ariel with a lot of different things gave them, gave Disney the ability to, or Square Enix the ability to do different mini games for Ariel. So Ariel, not a Princess of Heart, but Alice is. But it's just like Alice is not really a princess, but Ariel is, and it's just I don't remember what the exact criteria for the Princesses of Heart are. At some point, I will probably end up doing a video where I talk about the Princesses of Heart. But that'll be like once everything's all finished with all the Disney reviews. And so we get that. That's about what I have for Little Mermaid. Alan Menken and Howard Ashman did the music. Don Clements and John Musker, I believe, were the two co-directors of Little Mermaid. And they brought that animation spirit back to Disney, which allowed me to grow up on Little Mermaid, Beauty and the Beast, Aladdin, Lion King, all those other ones that are in there, Hunchback of Notre Dame, Fantasia 2000 led into that, a lot of other stuff that led into, that Little Mermaid caused all of that. And, the kind of that golden age of Disney, that second golden age of Disney. And, I thank them for it because it gives me stuff to talk about for this, but it also gave me movies that, made me very happy, and music that made me very happy growing up as a child. So I guess in a way, and I'm, saying this, however many videos in, I don't know exactly how many videos are in so far, but like all the videos in so far is just like, these videos are kind of, a love letter to Disney movies and to Disney in and of itself. So some point, I think I will do a video just about like how much Disney means to me as a whole, but that'll be for a while. So that's what I have for you. I thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope you have a nice rest of your day. Bye. If only I could make him understand. I just don't see things the way he does. I just don't see how a world that makes such wonderful things could be bad.